If it's not a passionate yes, then it's an immediate no. So let's get into it. Hello and welcome to another episode of Challenge Your Mindset. I'm your host, Noura, and lately I have been saying yes to doing things that honestly I didn't necessarily really want to do. And I know a lot of us are on this boat where you say yes in the moment, you get super excited, and then you walk away and you realize I don't really want to go out with them, or I don't want to do this activity, or I didn't want to take on an extra responsibility. Believe me, we've all been there. You know, you don't want to take that extra shift at work or do all the work on a group assignment, but you're having a hard time saying no. You're not necessarily a pushover. You're just too nice to say no, because no sounds like a mean word. And so I want to take us back a little bit to where we first heard this word, no. When we were growing up and maybe we were about to do something that might have been harmful to us, right? For example, we're about to touch the stove and our mom is standing there, or our dad is standing there, or our caretaker is standing there, and sees us about to do something that might put us in harm's way, they would yell, no, so you would stop right in your tracks. And when you got a little older and you wanted to go to your friend's house, but your friend wasn't the greatest influence on you, your parents would say no, and they wouldn't take you. And so you start connecting this word no to an emotion, and that emotion might be sadness, frustration, and then you start thinking of the word no as a mean word because that meant you wouldn't have what you wanted to have, right? And this word is definitely looked down upon, but it's certainly a magical word that can actually give us back control of our time and ultimately our life. Now that we understand why we look down upon the word no, because we're associating it with this emotion that we have, right? When we were told no, I want to actually help us get out of that. The first thing that we need to do is dissociate the word no from an emotion. No is a word just like any other word. And number two, we want to rephrase the word no so it could sound like something that isn't as harsh, right? And the number one rule to saying no is to not give an excuse. An excuse tends to sound like, I would love to if only this wasn't in the way, and people will find a way to get you out of the commitment and into their arrangement. So the best thing to do is to avoid this altogether. And so there are three categories. So let's start with the first one, giving an alternative time. Let's say your coworker who's super friendly, you really like them, they want to go out with you to grab dinner after work on a Friday night. However, you had already told your friend that you're down for a game night, or you just want to go home, order takeout, and watch Netflix because it was a particularly long week. But you don't want to hurt your coworkers' feelings, right? Because they seem super excited to grab dinner with you, right? And you don't want to ruin that connection because you see them at work every day. So instead of saying no, you could say, although dinner sounds great, I have a previous commitment tonight. Would you be available to grab dinner after work next Wednesday, let's say, or whatever time that works for you? And this shows them that you're genuinely tied up, but you're willing to do something with them at a later time. You're letting them down gently. You're showing them that you actually care about your relationship, but just today just doesn't work for you. And you didn't give an excuse. You didn't tell them what your previous commitment is. You're just leaving it at that. Dinner sounds great, but unfortunately I have a previous commitment tonight. Would you be available to grab dinner after work next Wednesday? Simple, to the point, you don't have to beat around the bush. Now, for the second category, we said give an empty alternative. In a different scenario, let's say you're not very fond of this coworker, you just don't like working with them, and they chose to invite you and many others for a post-work outing. You would much rather camp in the woods without a tent than go out with your coworkers after seeing them for 8 hours that day, but you don't know how to let them down gently, right? Because they all seem so hyped up. So you can say, I'll catch you all in the next one. I won't be able to make it out tonight. And just leave it at that. If they tend to be pushy, now we're getting into number three. Let's say your coworker is annoyingly persistent and you don't know how to get out of it. Again, you could use this excuse that we used in the first one. I have a previous commitment tonight. You could say, I have a prior commitment that I unfortunately won't be able to get out of, but I really appreciate the invite to show that, hey, I care about you. You don't have to give any excuses. You just say, I have a prior commitment that I unfortunately won't be able to get out of, but I really appreciate the invite, because you never know. Maybe in the future you might like to hang out with them. Number 4, you could say, now is not a good time. I'll tell you when we can. So again, we're still in the empty alternative, giving an empty alternative category. Whether you're physically exhausted, mentally and emotionally overwhelmed, or you just have a pile of tasks that need to get done, life happens. When you say that now is not a good time, you're ultimately saying, let's try for another time. No excuses given, no elaboration needed. I don't want to talk right now, and therefore I won't. Catch me at another time when I feel like I want to deal with humans. So by saying no, now is not a good time, I'll let you when we can, and fill in the blank, whatever we can, grab dinner or watch a movie or, hang out. You're giving an empty alternative. You're not actually setting a date or time, and so you're just leaving it out in the open. You're just not going to do it this time. All right. So right now we went over category 1, give an alternative time. We went over category 2, giving an empty alternative. Now, for the last category, these are kind responses that still indicate no. Number 5 on this list of ways to say no, you can say, I wish there were 2 of me. Again, it lets them down easy. It shows that you're torn, and if you could, you would make it to both engagements. It allows them to see that your prior engagement is of utmost importance. However, if it was possible, you would easily make time to be with them. They are still of some importance to you, but not your number 1 priority, and that's okay. So if you say, I wish there were 2 of me, it's kind of like, man, it kind of sucks. If there were 2 of me, I would send one over to you and do the other thing that I need to do. Without explicitly saying what the other thing is, nobody needs to know. Just leave it at that. Number 6, you can say, let's say you're working on a group project, or, you've been given a task at work, and either you don't have time to do it, or you don't feel qualified, or you just don't want to do it because you have so much on your plate. You could say, I don't believe I would be the right person to do X, Y, and Z, but, whoever else, blank person had done an impeccable job previously, and there's no doubt they can do it again. And just leave it at that. You pay a compliment to someone else's work. You put them on a pedestal in front of the group or whoever you're talking to, hype them up and get yourself out of that commitment. Number 7, I won't be able to. This is a straight up answer. You would say, no, I won't be able to. No excuses given, no excuses needed. Now you have to remember, you're not giving excuses. That's the number 1 rule. Once you put a because, you're opening that door for negotiation. So I won't be able to because I have my nephew's birthday party or whatever it may be. You're opening a door for negotiation. We want to keep that door locked. You don't want someone to convince you. You've already made up your mind. It's gentle, it's kind, it's to the point. No, I won't be able to. And so we covered 3 categories of ways you can say no gently. Giving an alternative time, giving an empty alternative, and just giving a kind response that still indicates no. Now, I don't want you to forget, you can just say no. If you remember, we dissociated the word from the emotion. It doesn't make you a mean person to say no. It doesn't make you evil. It doesn't mean that you hate the person in front of you. It doesn't mean you don't want to be friends with them anymore, unless, of course, you do it enough times and you actually don't want to be friends with them and you're just trying to give them a hint, right? But in the end, you can just say no. It's not only what you say, but how you say it. Be kind, don't just say no for the sake of saying no. Say it when you mean it. Don't say no, for example, I'm not going to join y'all for dinner, and allow the others to convince you to the point where you feel bad and decide to go every single time. Then your no has no meaning at all. They have cracked your no code, and now they know that they could push you out of the no zone by simply talking to you a little more. Use it to reclaim your time and ultimately your life. Don't just say no for the sake of saying no. I know that saying no is hard to do. And I think it's difficult for most people to say no, including myself. It's hard to say no, especially to people you love and care for. It's hard to say no, but sometimes you have to say it. And I remember watching this movie. It's called We Bought a Zoo. Matt Damon was the, leading star actor. And essentially they bought a zoo. They're fixing up the zoo. His wife had died and he has 2 kids. The last scene of the movie, he takes his kids to the place where he had first met their mom, right? And it was like a coffee shop. And he puts them inside the restaurant, inside the cafe, and they could see through the window. And he walks outside and he shows them that he's acting like he sees their mother, and he pauses and then he looks at his watch and he tells himself, okay, 20 seconds of courage, right? And so he walks into the cafe and he's very, very nervous because he just wants to talk to their future mom, right? He just wants to talk to this girl. And he looks at his watch and he's like, okay, I still have 15 seconds of courage left. And he goes to her and he talks to her. And essentially what I took from that scene is that 20 seconds of courage. 20 seconds of courage could really push you to do stuff that you think you would have never been able to do. It's that push of courage. And the reason I'm telling you this is that, yes, sometimes it's hard to say no, not only to the people you love and care about, but people who have some responsibility over you. For example, your boss at work, or an older sibling, or someone of a higher status than where you are in life right now. And so it's difficult for you to tell them no for whatever the reason. And in this episode, we talked about a few ways of saying no in fun ways, but in serious situations, you really need that boost of confidence. You need a boost of courage. And I found that this idea of 20 seconds of courage is very, very helpful. And I've personally used it and have found it to be very helpful. I'd look at my clock and just tell myself 20 seconds of courage and go ahead and say whatever I wanted to say, whatever needs to be said. I use it to say the truth. I use it to be honest. I tell myself 20 seconds of courage, and I'm just 100% fully, authentically myself and just honest. And I do it to respect my time. And I like to remind myself, again, with this idea of saying no, that I'm doing it to reclaim my time and ultimately reclaim my life. And by showing that I have respect for my time, I'm also respecting other people's time. And so for this week's mindset challenge, I want you to say no to someone you've always wanted to say no to, someone who may have been pushing you around. I want you to stand your ground. I don't want you to budge. I want you to become the person you've always wanted to be. Spend time on the people that you care about and doing the things you've always wanted to do, doing the things you love. Step away from things that act as a time suck. Life can be 10 times better if you eliminate the distractions, eliminate the things that you don't want to do or don't want to be around, and just do the things that you love and enjoy. If it's hard for you, just remember what Matt Damon said. 20 seconds of courage. That's all it takes, 20 seconds of courage, and see how that can transform your life. This is all I have for you for this week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Challenge Your Mindset. Follow this podcast wherever you may cast your pods by hitting that plus button. You could also follow us on Instagram at Nura Unplugged. That's Nura, N-O-R-A, Unplugged. Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you have a fabulous day and an even better week, and I will see you next week.